Imagine stepping off the beaten path into a place where the air feels impossibly thick, as though it remembers every scream ever uttered, every life lost too soon, and every lingering soul left behind. You might hear the faint echo of footsteps that aren't yours, or catch a whisper beneath the wind that seems to say, "Turn back while you can." In this video, we journey together to 5 locations where reality and the supernatural blur, places you should never visit unless you're prepared to confront the darkest echoes of history itself. Our first stop is a small, forgotten island nestled between Venice and the lagoon's western shore, an island whose name alone sends a shiver down the spine of any Italian: Poveglia Island. In the shadow of Venice's opulent palazzos, Poveglia Island lies silent, its crumbling stone walls swallowed by creeping vines and the relentless tide. Founded in Roman times, the island's beauty turned to dread in the 14th century when the plague swept across Europe. Ships carrying the sick and the dying were turned away from Venice and banished to this remote outpost. Pause for a moment and imagine standing on its abandoned docks, the salt water lapping at your boots, the gulls' cries echoing through empty corridors of collapsed buildings, and the knowledge that beneath your feet lie mass graves, thousands of victims buried hastily in unmarked pits, their names already forgotten by history. But the terror did not end with the plague. Centuries later, in the early 20th century, Poveglia became home to a psychiatric asylum. The infirmary's decaying wards were soon filled with the critically ill. Men and women deemed beyond hope by doctors who practiced experimental treatments now condemned by modern medicine. Locals whisper that Dr. Serletti himself, credited with developing electroconvulsive therapy, tested his early methods here, torturing patients with brutal shocks and lobotomies. Imagine exploring those peeling hallways by lantern light, each door hanging ajar, revealing rusted restraints and empty chairs stained with long-dried blood. They say if you listen closely, you might hear distant moans echoing across the salt flats, or catch a glimpse of a shadow drifting past a broken window, a specter condemned to relive the final torment of its mortal life. Even the bravest souls who ventured onto Poveglia reported an oppressive force seizing their hearts, as though unseen hands pressed upon their chests. Temperature readings would plummet by several degrees, cameras malfunctioned, and some entered only to flee hours later, rattled to the bone. By 1968, the asylum was shut down, abandoned to rot. Attempts to repurpose the island, a spa, a luxury retreat, were abandoned quickly as investors encountered inexplicable mishaps. Bulldozers stalling, workers fleeing in panic, and a pervasive sense that the island wanted to be left alone. Today, Poveglia remains off-limits to visitors, its gates chained and patrolled by guards. But if you peer through the rusted bars, you still sense the lingering weight of sorrow and anguish, a reminder that some places hold memories so dark they refuse to be erased. From the rotting halls of Poveglia, where plague victims and tortured patients walk their final steps, our next destination is a grand, stately mansion in the heart of the American South, where a different kind of tragedy unfolded beneath the sprawling oaks and moss-draped branches of Louisiana. The Myrtles Plantation. Nestled on a bend of the Mississippi River near St. Francisville, Louisiana, the Myrtles Plantation stands like a portrait of antebellum grace, its white pillared facade reflecting in the sluggish waters, its sprawling gardens awash in the scent of magnolia. Yet beneath its genteel veneer lies a tapestry of whispered horrors stretching back nearly 2 centuries. The plantation was built in 1796 for General David Bradford, but its darkest chapter began after it was sold to Clark Woodruff in 1817. Woodruff's wife and 2 children died under mysterious circumstances within a single year, fueling rumors of illness, poison, and perhaps something more malevolent. They say the Woodruffs hired a slave named Chloe, who wore a green turban to hide her disfigured ears, a remnant of punishment for an earlier transgression. Chloe's life ended abruptly, either by hanging or drowning, depending on which rumor you believe. Pause and envision wandering down the long veranda as dusk settles, the cicadas' chorus rising to a crescendo. The air is humid, sticky, blurring the edges of reality. Light filters through the thick oak canopy, casting flickering, moving shadows across the manicured lawn. Inside, Portraits of the Woodruffs stare down with lifeless eyes, as though silently judging all who dare to trespass. Visitors claim to feel Chloe's presence most strongly in the old dining room, where a large mirror is said to trap her restless spirit. People have reported seeing a young girl's face framed behind the glass, only to watch it vanish when they blink. On more than one occasion, guests have awoken to find wet footprints leading from the kitchen to the dining hall, despite no one having risen from bed in the dead of night. Rooms on the second floor echo with disembodied giggles and soft weeping that seems to come from the rafters themselves. Some guests reported the feeling of being tugged by unseen fingers while they slept, or hearing a baby's cry despite no infant ever having resided there in modern times. A permanent fixture in the accounts of psychics who visited, Chloe appears in blurry photographs as a small figure in a green-tinted haze, her expression veiled in sorrow and rage. Yet skeptics argue that the true hauntings of Myrtles derive not from Chloe, but from the tragic history of yellow fever and cholera outbreaks that swept through the South in the 1800s, decimating families, enslaved and free alike. Every wooden floorboard, every beam of sunlight falling across the parlor, seems to carry an echo of that suffering, an imprint that refuses to fade. The Myrtles plantation welcomes tours today, albeit with cautionary notices reminding visitors that some encounters cannot be explained away. But if you choose to stay overnight in the Lee or Bradford rooms where so many tragedies unfolded, prepare yourself for whispers in the darkness and doors that close of their own accord. Because in a place where history bleeds seamlessly into legend, the spirits of the lost often refuse to rest. From the heavy humidity of Louisiana and the mournful wails of the Myrtles, let us travel north to the towering Rockies of Colorado, where a grand alpine retreat once hosted the elite, and still seems to welcome guests from both this world and the next, the Stanley Hotel. Perched on a windswept bluff overlooking the town of Estes Park, Colorado, the Stanley Hotel stands like a solitary sentinel against the vast sweep of Rocky Mountain peaks. Built in 1909 by entrepreneur Freeland Oscar Stanley, co-inventor of the Stanley steamer automobile, the hotel was envisioned as a luxurious summer haven for the wealthy, its halls filled with mahogany furnishings, chandeliers, and the faint scent of polished brass. However, the hotel's most enduring legacy is its connection to the supernatural, immortalized in popular culture by Stephen King's terrifying tale, The Shining, which was inspired by his own eerie overnight stay. King arrived with his wife on a storm-swept autumn evening, the hotel nearly empty, its staff dwindled to a skeleton crew. He wandered the dimly lit corridors, the distant groan of heating vents echoing like disembodied whispers. At dinner, he was seated alone at a long table set for dozens, and later claimed to have overheard arguments in an adjacent room that had no occupants. Pause and picture this. The grand staircase stretching up toward shadowed balconies, each landing illuminated by flickering sconces that cast dancing, supplicating forms upon the walls. In room 217, where King lodged, you might sense a gentle brush along the bedsheet at dawn, though no breeze stirs the curtains. Guests who venture there today often report waking to the sight of an unseen force tugging at the blankets, or catching a fleeting glimpse of a woman in period dress slipping silently from room to room. Beyond 217, the hotel is awash in whispers. The concert hall piano sometimes begins to play on its own, notes echoing in a space devoid of pianists. Guests have seen the ghost of a former maid, her hands perpetually poised as though dusting a long-gone drawing room. Others speak of the apparition of a young boy, glimpsed playing along the staircase, his laughter fading as you approach. Former owner Stanley himself is said to linger, dressed immaculately in early 20th century attire, occasionally glimpsed gazing out over the valley from the rooftop or standing behind the front desk long after staff have turned in for the night. During frigid winter months, when the hotel closes to the public, the caretaker often hears footsteps on second-floor landings, though no one else occupies the building. Skeptics chalk these tales up to overstimulated imaginations. After all, the hotel's historic status and the propaganda of The Shining have drawn thousands of thrill-seekers eager to glimpse something unexplainable. But even those who arrive determined not to believe have returned as converts. rattled by doors slamming without cause, or recording EVPs, electronic voice phenomena, echoing through empty rooms. Today, the Stanley caters to both living and dead guests, its grand parlors and lantern-lit walkways open to paranormal tours. But be warned, to wander through these halls after midnight is to risk encountering a presence so subtle and insistent that it may follow you home, embedding itself in your dreams and casting long shadows across your mind. From the wind-whipped mountain air of Colorado, let us cross the Atlantic to a land where medieval legends are etched in stone and where one castle, built over an ominous chasm, earned the name Gateway to Hell. The Hauska Castle. Deep in the forested hills north of Prague, Hauska Castle emerges from the mist like a phantom fortress, its gray ramparts climbing skyward, its turrets piercing the low-hanging clouds. Unlike most castles built to defend against human foes, Hauska's foundations rest upon a vast pit, a yawning cavity said to be bottomless, eerily silent and eternally cold. Centuries of local folklore claim that this pit was a direct conduit to hell, a realm of unspeakable horrors whose denizens occasionally slipped through to roam the forested edges of Bohemia. In 1270, King Ottokar II commissioned the castle to seal the chasm, erecting high walls and placing holy relics at its gate, hoping to keep whatever lay below from escaping. Picture, if you will, standing at the edge of those ancient walls as twilight descends, the smell of pine and damp earth thick in the air. The castle's courtyard is silent, save for the rustle of leaves collapsing in unwanted patterns. Below, no bird sings, no insect hums, only a stillness so profound it intrudes upon your heartbeat, reminding you that the abyss hungers for permanence. Legends speak of hooded figures glimpsed near the pit, faceless shapes that vanish when approached. Some claim to have seen grotesque creatures crawling upward, only to recoil and retreat when warded by the faint glow of candles. In the stables, where horses refused to pass after watching something emerge from the darkness below, the animals would neigh and rear, sensing the presence of something unseen. During World War II, the Nazis converted Hauska into a research station. Rumors abound that they conducted experiments beneath the castle, investigating arcane symbols carved above the pit, attempting to harness whatever demonic power lay within. Workers there reported hearing voices chanting in unknown tongues echoing from deep within the earth, and they claimed that some men went in and simply did not return. Today, Hauska remains privately owned but open to visitors, though local guides caution that entry is at one's own risk. They tell of cameras failing near the chasm's edge, of severe nosebleeds suffered by those who linger too long, and of nightmares so vivid they drive travelers to the brink of madness. As you walk beneath the stony battlements, you sense a tug, an almost gravitational pull, drawing your gaze downward, compelling you to stare into emptiness, even as your rational mind protests that no human could survive such a fall. It is here, on the precipice between our world and whatever lies beneath, that you understand why some castles are never meant to be explored. From the haunted ramparts of Hauska, steeped in medieval dread, we journey back to America's bluegrass country, where a once grand tuberculosis hospital stands silent, its empty wards echoing with decades of whispered suffering. Waverly Hills Sanatorium. High atop a fog-laden hill overlooking Louisville, Kentucky, the abandoned Waverly Hills Sanatorium looms like a skeletal colossus, a sprawling, sterile complex that once housed thousands of tuberculosis patients who came seeking a cure but found only despair. In the early 1900s, before antibiotics, TB was a death sentence, and Waverly Hills was built to isolate and treat sufferers from across the region. Imagine entering its iron gates at dawn, the mist drifting through skeletal ironwork, the structure's long wings stretching into the haze like the ribs of a great beast. In its prime, Waverly Hills boasted sun porches where patients lay in fresh air, in the belief that sunlight could kill the white plague. But as death tolls soared, a grim tunnel carved into the hillside, the Death Tunnel, became a nightly exit for corpses. Under cover of darkness, attendants loaded the dead onto carts, stealing them away from the living to avoid tanking the morale of those still fighting for breath. Step into the main lobby, and the echoes of coughing patients seem to seep from the peeling paint on the walls. Floorboards creak as though under the weight of invisible footsteps. In room 502, Infamous as the site of a doctor's experimental treatments, witnesses have felt sudden bursts of frigid air, and some swear they heard faint moans emanating from within empty bed frames. The death tunnel itself defies rational explanation. Visitors who descend its narrow stairwell tell of lights flickering without electrical cause, of footsteps racing up from the darkness below, and of men in antiquated uniforms, apparently former stretcher bearers, emerging from the gloom to watch in silence before vanishing again. Cameras left filming inside the tunnel record orbs of light drifting through the hall, and audio recorders capture lamenting voices that seem to follow you as you ascend the steps. Some of the most chilling accounts come from the sanatorium's cafeteria, where survivors gather on the anniversary of the opening each year to share stories. One nurse recalled shelving a cart laden with medicine, only to feel it shudder forward by itself. Another visitor spoke of seeing a nurse's uniform float down the hallway before dropping to the floor as though someone had removed it in a hurry. With tuberculosis effectively eradicated by the mid-20th century, Waverly Hills closed its doors in the 1960s. But long after the windows were boarded up and the patients moved elsewhere, the building's presence persisted in local nightmares. Urban explorers who slipped inside reported a pervasive sense of being watched, followed by cold fingers brushing their necks and occasional disembodied cries that seemed to call their names with haunting familiarity. Today, Waverly Hills offers guided ghost tours, though few outside the most daring circles claim to leave unscarred. They say the sanatorium keeps its secrets tucked behind every crumbling plaster wall, each ghostly wail a testament to human suffering and the desperate hope that a breath might still be found. And so we draw the final curtains on this journey through places where the living dare not linger. Each of these sites, Poveglia Island, the Myrtles Plantation, the Stanley Hotel, Hauska Castle, and Waverly Hills Sanatorium, holds a story woven from tragedy, loss, and the inexplicable whispers of what lies beyond the veil. To tread their halls, you must be prepared to confront a past that can never be undone, to feel the weight of sorrow pressing upon your chest, and to sense the flicker of something watching from the dark. Because in these places, the boundary between this world and the next is as thin as the breath of a dying candle, and sometimes the shadows that gather therein never fully recede. If you ever find yourself drawn to these curiosities, remember this: some stones were never meant to be overturned, some corridors never walked alone, and some doors, once opened, refused to close. Safe travels, and may your curiosity never lead you where only the bravest or the most foolish dare to go.